So we're sitting here today with Zoran Lazic. He is coming to share his journey. He's got such a remarkable journey of immigrating to Canada and growing up here with his experiences in his family of origin and what that really has meant for him in his journey and undoing some things that we carry in our past. And I'm just really excited to hear what you have to share and your journey with perspective taking and walking with the darkness that we all walk in, and how do we get out of it and prosper and create the life that we want to create for ourselves. So welcome, and thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Start by telling us a little bit about your
Yeah,
background,
your
man, if you
childhood.
don't mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Were you born? You weren't. Were
I
you
was born in Germany.
Okay.
My mother went there to work. I don't know if I was, not that I wasn't a wanted child or anything, but I don't know, maybe not. So I got that feeling. But anyways,
Right.
they went from Germany. They got together. This goes later on as I found out my dad wasn't my father, but they went from Germany to Canada. I was about 6 years old, let's say. And then, we moved around the city a lot, every year, probably from beginning till 15, 7, 8 times.
Like different houses.
Yes, all the
Yeah,
time.
Yeah. Did you
I just
change
didn't
schools every time
all the
too?
time, every school.
Yeah.
And back then, you moved from St. Clair to, a couple of main streets over. It was like the end of the world, right?
Yeah.
Mhm,
The city was, Shepherd was farm back then.
mhm,
So we would move around, and every year in the summertime, I'd always be all by myself. That's where the dogs came in,
mhm.
and you're always a new kid. So you're always learning how to gain friends. But at that
Yeah.
moment, it was bad because you're always learning how to
You never
gain
have anything
friends.
solid. Yeah.
So you'd be walking around downtown, Yonge Street and stuff all by yourself because you
You don't know anyone
don't
right
know
now.
anyone,
So,
which was good
yeah.
after because I could go by myself.
Well, like right? You see how when you look back at it, you're like, oh, okay, this was what I gained, or this is what I learned. But
At
a lot
that
of
moment, it was hard.
immigrant
It is hard.
families that come in, they settle down in these pods, these sections, which are affordable and
Yeah.
all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Brings back a lot of memories. But when we're going through that at that time, and then we're moving around, not everybody moves around. Some people just stay in one place and they try to get that stability for the family. So for one reason or another, you're moving around,
that
and
was
you
never
don't know
stable.
why you're moving around. When you're thinking that, go back to that kid, whatever, 6 years old,
Yeah.
whatever. It's hard to recall.
Yeah.
But if you were to try to recall, how did you make sense of it, or did you have a question and just not ask? Like, what was that
Sure,
like?
you asked, like, why are we moving?
Yeah,
It's just
and
my job. We got a job
Mhm.
somewhere else, or
Mm.
it was always moving. You didn't get it. You just didn't get it. But the home wasn't even stable.
right.
So never mind living in a place for years.
Mhm.
Didn't
What
have
wasn't stable for you there?
drinking, gambling, just like the violent part. So
Mhm.
today, I don't really stand for violence at home. Goes back to those days.
Mhm.
The milk is cold. I said it before.
Mm.
And to throw the milk against the wall, like, what's the big deal? It's just cold. Warm
Mm.
it up. Or I'm pushing buttons on the radio. My father, I thought, who was my father back then, would kick it and smash in the radio and say, "No, you can't move it." Like,
Mm.
what's the big deal? I'm just a kid, like
Yeah.
changing stations. So the fear again, and you didn't question. You just went
Followed.
and you just dealt with it yourself.
So, while you just talked about you're walking around downtown on Yonge Street.
Mhm.
What are you
12,
thinking
13,
while you're
14.
walking around? Like, what was it, just to get away from it, or to
Well, you
walk?
had to do something,
Well,
and you didn't want to stay home.
Mhm.
And it was, you just walked around, see what was going on, learning how to walk around all by yourself, I guess.
and
Not really
we
looking for
typically.
people or anything.
Well, that's what I was just going to ask
not
you.
Just
really
to just to
looking.
Did
get
you
out of
notice
that
it?
Just
environment.
walking around.
Yeah.
Take the bus. It would take from where I was half an hour to get downtown.
Yeah.
That was our part of the day. You walk around, to get back. That was your day.
Yeah. I remember following creeks in Brampton, like following the creeks
Mm.
for kilometers and then just
So you did stuff.
yeah, you just do.
Well, when you're going through school and you like you said, you're making new friends now. So you're a social person. So we're all looking for
Yeah.
a group to kind of belong with and get with.
Yeah.
Um, And as one group of friends you make, and now it's time to move. So you're seeking to make new friends. Did you ever, in that endeavor to try and find new friends and new groups, get invited into things that you're like, oh my God, and because there are influences that are around. And it's kind of like, I don't want to say it's a gamble because you never know, but when you're looking for
you did a lot of
friendship,
things.
sometimes you get invited into a group,
You did a lot of stuff.
and you don't realize that that's not necessarily the kind of influence you were actually seeking, but now that's your group.
Well, yeah, you get into a lot of stuff, stealing, drugs, just to get
through.
And it's just, I don't want to say we were like that. We were like that. I'm not saying because we were in poverty. It's just, I don't know why.
Well, that's what
I
I'm
don't
curious
know.
about.
So
Like
we would
do
steal.
things because there are other leaders of
Yeah.
the group that are
So
saying
we
this
would
is what we
steal
do.
from a store, let's say,
Mm.
and we would get caught.
Yeah.
And the person would say, it's not that you stole,
Mm.
it's how you stole. You're only 7 years old, but
Mm.
the way you did it was very, like the way you hit it very well, blah, blah, blah.
Mm.
So it was more about how you did it versus how
Right.
you did it.
Right.
So that's what they're more concerned about.
The fact that you have like such a developed skill for that already.
For that,
at such a
because
young
as you were
age.
growing up, you take this, take that, and you get better,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and then you develop more skills, and you're only like 8 years old,
Yeah.
8, 9 years old, right? So, but those some of the skills maybe you don't want to develop. So you're a good business, but in something else, not
Right.
that.
Would you call that learning?
That's learning.
That's
Yeah.
That's a
learning.
good learning, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
How to be
And you know who to
deceitful,
Yeah.
but in a intelligent way. So you're still intelligent. It's just that you didn't direct it to.
And you learn how to read situations. You learn how to read
So you're
people.
still good, like in those
yeah.
things. It's just that it's a different kind of
It's like
intelligence.
misdirected skill.
Yeah.
Fine, but when we're going through it at that time, a lot of people stick to that. They don't realize,
And
hey,
break
hold
that
on a
cycle.
second. Yeah, breaking that cycle. Exactly. And it's this idea of,
And then it
well,
was
this
fun,
is
right?
my idea of using my mind. And they justify, like, these guys,
Yeah.
anti-establishment, whatever you want to call it. And they're like, oh, these are businesses. They have enough money. That it's
Yeah,
almost
yeah.
like I'm coming to take what's already mine. And we find a way to justify
So you're still
doing these
bettering
things.
stuff. You're
Right.
still bettering yourself. Like
But
you're
at
making
some
your
point in
better,
time-
but not better in that way.
Right.
You're bettering yourself in being deceitful or stealing and stuff.
So that's how that was one phase. And today you're a guy who believes, okay, you got integrity, you're doing all these things. When does it start occurring to this 8-year-old or 6-year-old that, hey, hold on a second, this is not it?
It took years after. It still took time
Mm.
because every time you moved, you wanted to fit in.
Mm.
And every time you fit in with the group that you fit in before.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean?
So the immigrants, the people that couldn't speak,
Okay.
didn't have money, single parent family maybe, and that's how we became a group or the family. And
Yeah,
you
those
would, for
kids
some
kind of
reason you would
magnetized
always
each
Got
other.
it.
and we were
Yeah.
just stealing was just like we're not going to read, like
Mhm.
what are we going to do? We have to do something,
Mm.
and instead of
We didn't read the do not steal sign.
reading a
Yes.
book or things like that, you're influenced by everything else that's out there, and you say, okay, this is the only way you're going to get ahead is by stealing or by that direction. Versus
Was your experience? I know when a lot of kids go through it, they say like there's a form of acceptance or like a social currency if you.
Mm.
well, my mother
Like-
never pushed me. 50% was enough for her.
Mm.
Oh, okay.
Just get 50% in school. Don't worry about it.
Mm.
And I was wondering after, like, why? Why
Mm.
didn't you want me to get 80
Mm.
or go to university or something? And then as I grew older, it was her control that if I did go to school and get more intelligent, I would move away or something,
Mm.
right? So that was how she kept me down.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then you think the whole world sort of is like that. Everybody's keeping you down. Then the wealthy people are keeping you down. And then da 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 da, and you start doing these things
Right.
That narrative you find
because
it
you
in
think, well,
everything.
everybody's keeping
Yeah.
me down. Why do we have this, and why are we in Ontario housing? Blah blah blah.
Right.
I guess everybody's keeping us down,
Mhm.
and it had nothing to do with it. Because my mother was making me believe that. But why wouldn't I want to believe what she said?
Yeah, it's your mom. It's your mom.
You know,
And maybe even she believed it because it was
That was
something
her
that was,
experience.
yeah, right.
Out of fear.
It could go up the line as well, like in terms of what she was afraid of, or what she was influenced to think, or what, where she got her information from.
So she
So,
was
like,
afraid all the time,
right.
constant.
So was she your mom born and raised in Germany herself,
No, she's
or
Yugoslavian.
she's Yugoslavian?
So she went through the war,
Okay.
and she was moving.
Mm-hmm.
You had to have your bags packed.
Yeah.
When the Germans came in, or Russians, or whoever it was, you have to grab your bag and you leave. So maybe that's one of the reasons. Every year, so you're not established. Maybe I don't know. When I think about it, and she was always afraid of people in uniforms. And that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. Well, that
A lot
fear
of
she
trauma
put
there
into
for her.
you, but that wasn't like
It wasn't your
the way to
yours to
go.
carry.
When I think about it now, but at that time, like, why wouldn't I believe her? And then you figure out after, not your dad anymore, and that moving all over the place. Now like when I remember the violence, it was I was one of those kids where, like I said it before, where he would throw my father's clothes out the window, throw a suitcase on the lawn and stuff. That was every week or every other 3-4 days. Was that constant? So why would I want to not hang out with friends and stuff like that? But when we moved, it always cut that part off. So I'd always have to start all over again. As I think about it, every 3 or 4 months, when I would meet friends, my mother would always find something negative about them. Oh, they didn't say hi to me. They're rude. I don't know, something, anything, to try to,
Like insert a wedge.
yeah. Even with dogs, they're too hairy. It's not cleaning. I don't know, something. It was always after I thought about it, I said, why is it every 3 or 4 months something negative always
Yeah.
happens?
When did
about
you
a
notice
friend?
that pattern? Because that's a really
Probably
important thing to
my
pick
late
up on.
teens,
Okay.
because it was every 3 months or 4 months roughly. Why is she always saying something negative about my friend? You're going out too much. He didn't say hi. Like something simple, like,
Yeah.
but maybe like you didn't hear him.
Or maybe he thought you were busy, or yeah, like
And
something.
she was really about respect and kind of thing, but overboard.
So those are the early years, so
Overboard.
going to 8, and then when you move into your teenage years, it's a consistent pattern. You're moving around constantly.
And then we moved at 10.
Mm-hmm.
My father at the time, that I thought he was my father, he went back home for vacation. We moved. We went from Toronto to Vancouver
Oh wow.
because she said I had enough.
While he was on vacation.
Yeah. So I didn't know it was a secret. He's going on vacation.
Oh,
Okay.
got it.
Okay, we're packing up, and we flew it was over.
That's a significant move.
We went to Vancouver, and then in a hotel room or motel, she said, well, I have to tell you something. He's not really your father. I was like, what do you mean? So that was about 10.
And was he out of your life after that point, or was that
15, I kind of,
so he
one or
came
twice
back?
I might see him.
Oh, okay.
He ended up living in a building next door to us.
While you're going through this, I'm just wondering about like what your thoughts are at that time. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Where everything isn't real now.
Would you say surreal? Would you say angry? What would you say?
Well, it wasn't angry. It was
No?
more, I don't want to say depressed, but
Okay.
it was like, what do you mean it's not my dad?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
The little
today, when
foundation
you
you
say
had,
it,
yeah.
you can say it with a smile.
Yeah.
You can laugh at it a little,
But
but
then it was hard. It's
but
just
that's what
like,
I'm
Well, yeah,
trying to
because the
figure
little
out.
foundation that you did have, even though it was very chaotic and always shifting and changing, you did have the person who you thought was your dad, and you did have your mom, and you always moved together.
yeah, so all this
So, like,
emotional
yeah.
support, like bonding,
Yeah,
now,
yeah.
what?
Yeah. And
So it was cut off,
Yeah.
just like that. And so it was another thing,
the loss, yeah.
you know. So
What
it
was your
another
way
thing.
of, at that moment, what does that person say to themselves? What do you do to deal with that? What did you think to yourself?
I'm not sure. I probably can't remember.
Mm.
Just, it was like, why would you do that for?
Mm.
Why didn't you just tell me before?
Right.
What's the big deal?
Mhm.
So what she explained was that to come to Canada, you have to be a family.
Mm-hmm.
As a single
Oh.
mother, she couldn't come to Canada.
Mm-hmm.
So they got together and said, look, we're going to go to Canada. Whatever happens, happens. So they got married as a convenience.
Sure.
To be able to come to Canada, and then whatever happened, happened. I didn't know that till I was 10.
Wow.
So you're caught in this arrangement, right?
Yeah, it was an
And
arrangement,
You,
really.
you,
Yeah.
you thought of this as like a stable point that you could focus on, and you turned out, okay, that wasn't part of the plan, or even
So
thought
you,
of. Right?
so you end up going more with friends outside,
Mm.
more,
Mhm.
more, more. for that reason as well. And your mother's always working. She was a cleaning lady, housekeeper, taking care of other people. So you're not alone, but you have a lot of time on your own. So you're 10, 11, 12.
Walking around.
You're I'm not like a man. I'm just a kid.
At that point in time, what would you say your goals were? What were you thinking about in terms of the future, or were you just looking at the present?
There was no future.
Right?
Yeah.
It was just that
Surviving.
moment.
Did you ever look at the future and like?
You had your
I don't want
dreams.
to think about it. That's what I'm wondering.
you
Did you
had
have
dreams.
What were your dreams back then?
To be famous, what
Okay.
everybody else kind of has to be successful.
Okay.
There's, to have these, to get through stuff, to have magical powers, I guess, all this kind of stuff
Sure.
that you have as a kid.
Very
Right.
fantasy thinking. Yeah.
Those kind of things. And then you realized after that, you can do it,
Hmm.
within reason. Like you can't jump off the building, but you can do it if you change your perspective.
So
So
you
that's
said,
what that helped me.
yeah, you said like around 18, you noticed the shift when how you noticed
Yeah,
the pattern with
17,
your
18.
mom. So what was the antecedent that brought that perspective shift for you? Like what happened?
Well,
to
I started
prompt that?
reading books about, self-help books, perspective and stuff.
Love her words, eh? The antecedent. She's like my vocabulary. I'm like, so what happened just before that? Okay, got it. That's why she's here with me, to help me develop my vocabulary.
To say something fancy and then
The
just
smart one.
go to the corner.
Yeah. I was like, antecedent. Oh, that's what it means. I didn't know. I need to learn these things. But okay, thank you.
It's really not
But
that
I am
important,
interested
but
to
yeah.
know what that is. I
Yeah.
really want to know that part, actually.
Mm.
Maybe they'll edit this part out. Who
Yeah,
knows?
it's the good stuff. It's the real stuff.
I guess back then I just started reading books.
Come on, you just said you didn't want to read books and you
No.
wanted to hang out.
Yeah.
No, she was talking about 18.
18,
Right. So
yeah.
then how does it go
What I
from
was
that to
talking
that?
about was 12, 13,
Okay.
14, 15. Eventually,
What? Just like that.
well, no, not just like that.
Okay.
I'm trying to think. It's hard.
Did it just get boring hanging out with people doing the same
No, I
things
still
over
hung
and
out
over
with
again?
them.
Yeah.
It's just,
Or did it happenstance? Was there a book that was interesting? Or
yeah, I didn't really
Was
read
there
a
a
lot of
teacher?
books until
You saw a moment. It sounds
there
like you
was a
saw a moment
moment.
with your mom.
You're
and then you
alone.
started to.
well, that's what I'm
you're
wondering about.
alone.
Yeah.
Let's say I was watching TV and they have infomercials and one was about self-help and I said, well, let
Okay.
me see that book.
Okay.
And I read the book
Huh.
and it was like, hey,
This helps.
it's like, there's, how the brain works and stuff. You
Mm.
go for the lesser pain and
okay.
pain and pleasure, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So you always go for the pleasure part versus the pain part.
Right.
Right.
And if you can control that part, if there's two pains, you always go for the lesser pain, just naturally.
Mhm.
Sure.
So that's what, you thought about, this is what I was doing. So why don't I
Mm.
push through and make it all
Ah,
positive if I can?
right.
That was that, I don't know if it was Anthony Robbins, one of those guys.
Right.
I read a book
Yeah.
and it was like, wow,
It just shifted
is amazing.
for you.
Yes.
your perspective.
Yes.
And then from then on, I read books like all the time after.
Okay.
And the guys would call me, one of the guys say, you're like motivating us about, hey, you can do it. And,
What do you mean, one of the guys? Your
one of the
friends?
friends, yeah, as in
Oh.
my teens and
Okay.
20s,
Okay.
because I would always be saying, hey, it's your perspective or this or that.
You would start saying this.
Yeah, because I'd be
Yeah.
reading
you're-
these books and listening to tapes. I ordered some tapes
Okay.
now that I remember. And I would say, hey, no, we can do this and you can do this. And,
Like we can do like change and create what we want. kind
let's
of
start a
thing?
business. Let's do
Yeah.
something. We can do it. And they would say, yeah, you'll be the motivator guy of the business. So those things. It's just that
Mm.
I was doing that. Not everybody else was
Yeah.
for a first week or month or whatever. Oh, yeah. And then after it gets back to worrying about minor things.
Survival
Yeah.
too, right?
Well, it has to be an intrinsic experience.
saying, "No,
right?
come on."
Yeah.
That was one of the hardest things to do was change my perspective.
So this is really interesting. So thanks for asking that, because it's, all of a sudden there's something along the way. For you, it was you read a book and it just happened. What I wonder about is for a lot of people that when we go through it, a lot of us, you've gone through it, we've all gone through it. It was there. You could have decided not to pick up
Yeah.
the book.
Mhm.
You could have decided not to look at that opportunity and just let it pass. And what I wonder is, I'm amazed at this.
Why did I choose that book, or why did I go ahead and read it?
No, what I wonder about is a lot of times those opportunities, every story I hear, there's always an opportunity. And it's like standing there right beside you in your peripheral. You just noticed it that day at that point. What I'm curious about is I'm wondering, were there always opportunities there?
Yeah.
I love how it works.
Yeah.
That there's always these opportunities and they're always beside us. It's just the day we decide to look over and go, I guess I'll pick that
And they don't
up.
come with a big flashing that
They
sign that
don't.
says, "Hey, I'm an opportunity."
But our perspective wasn't.
Yes.
But our
That's it.
perspective wasn't that there are opportunities.
Yeah.
Right.
Our perspective was there's no opportunities out there.
So we
Yeah.
say there's no opportunity, and
So
then
what
we
are we
don't
looking- so
recognize
we're not
that
even
there's,
looking for
that
it.
there's an opportunity. That's what I
Yeah,
find
it's not
really
even in your
cool.
awareness.
As you start thinking about opportunities, then you start finding opportunities
Yeah.
because you start seeing them.
Right.
But your perspective is,
It governs what you see in the world.
I'm in a hole and that's the way it is.
Yeah.
I just got to claw my way out, and there's no opportunities.
And there's
Yeah.
no
Or sometimes
opportunities.
people will just say, "I'm in a hole and that's my life,
Yes.
and I can't climb out."
Right. So
And
they say
so-
that and they don't see the opportunities.
Yeah.
That's the hardest. One
That's
of the
the
hardest
hard-
things to do is
That is the
Yeah.
hard part.
is to change your mind, your perspective, and
Yeah.
view things differently.
Now,
which was
also
hard.
when you started
they
changing your
keep going
pers-
back and forth.
Right.
I mean, it was hard.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Hard.
Well, it's not like a
and then you're
one-
on
a zero to one.
It
There's
took
a
years
transition.
and years, and
100%.
one thing led to another book, another, and then I went back, and then you fall off the wagon, you go back and back, and then you say, "Well, I'm not reading anymore. I got to go back because I'm starting to
waver.
drift back into my thoughts like I was before."
But there's this awareness with you that, okay, I'm falling off.
Yeah.
I'm not reading, right? You're able to take
I
like
have
this.
stuff
can
on
make
the
the
wall.
correlation.
You have things on the wall to remind you every day.
Okay, well, is
even
that what
today,
you
I
did?
still have stuff all over
what
the
things?
walls.
Okay.
The past doesn't equal the future, and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Some quotes, some
Mhm.
Henry Ford quotes, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I'd have all over the walls. So when I got out of bed, there's
Just that first
on
thing
the
to
walls,
put that in.
and I read now. I read 3 or 4 things that are
Yeah.
written every day. I read that, and I read it before I go to bed.
Yeah.
Ah, right.
So I
So
say to
how-
myself, "It's going to be a great day."
Yeah.
Not as a parrot, but
Yeah.
to say this
No,
is
but
going to
there's
be amazing.
actually a lot of neuroscience to that habit you created, because
what I
what we
re-
digest first thing in the morning and right before we go to sleep, our brain is most perceptible
Mm.
to information and creating. So that's why it's so important that you feed your brain something so positive early in the morning, because it's going to embed itself so much more.
So I believe in that. But
Yeah, yeah.
when I
It's
was
really
10
powerful.
to 15, 17, 18,
Say that
you
to
don't
that
believe
guy.
in that,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
just believe in this is the way my genes are, whatever. This is where I was born.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
But it's not it. You can
Yes.
change.
So what was your first, after you had this this epiphany at 18 and read the book, what was your first actionable kind of change that you did, moving from, the peer groups that were not necessarily always involved in positive things? What was your first actionable change with that perspective change?
What do you mean?
And what did you do differently in your life? How did you show up differently? Because you weren't involved in
You
criminal activity anymore.
tried to
or
do-
were you?
Not afraid, let's say. One little thing.
Yeah. Well, what was
Okay.
your first lesson? I
Yeah.
guess. Right.
Like you take a chance.
Hmm.
Back then it was take a chance, sing and dance, take a chance. So before I would not take any chances. Even just to say hi to someone.
Hmm.
You didn't
Something
take a
so
chance.
simple. Yeah.
Anything. There was some simple things.
Yeah, but hard.
It was the hardest thing to do because
Hmm.
people might say you're shy, blah, blah, but you're not. You're afraid
Yeah.
to say hi. Let's say it's that simple, and you might not get in return. But
That
in
rejection.
your mind,
Yeah.
you're going to give me the worst return possible. But meanwhile, you could be saying, hey, this is a great person. But up here,
Right.
because of your upbringing, let's say,
Yeah.
I wasn't brought up to think that way. I was brought up to think, be
Yeah.
paranoid, don't trust people,
Mhm.
fear, blah, blah, blah. So
Yeah.
when I
So you're
would
always
say
fighting
something,
that
why would I not
programming.
think that you were going to be negative towards me? So I had to get over that part
Hmm.
to be able to move forward. And that was really hard.
Yeah. And it doesn't happen
Yeah.
in one move.
No, it was
It's
years,
it's
it was time.
transitions.
And then I read a quote, fear is false evidence appearing real.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, that was another
Yeah.
light bulb. Like,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah.
Without being reckless. I know if I jump off the building,
Sure.
I might not
Yes.
make it.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
There's natural fear to protect us,
Yeah, but-
and then
but
there's
it's the fear to
created
go
fear
ahead.
that's programming. Yeah.
It was the fear to put yourself out there.
Yeah.
That was the fear. From saying hi to doing anything. You have to put yourself out there.
So you
But once
started
you
to
get
put yourself
noticed-
out there.
Yeah, you say hi, you become more, you start telling people your ideas.
Right.
And then things, start changing because now you're not afraid to say things. And if they say, I don't like it, I mean, it's bad. They just don't like it.
Yeah, that's the
But
perspective.
But you always, so as I grew up, I grew up as a pleaser because I had to please my mother.
Mm-hmm.
So she would calm down and it wouldn't get violent and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to, not do things I wanted to do, but to be pleasing. And as I got older, it became, I was a pleaser. Like, what do you want to do? Make you feel good. So you can calm down.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the way I grew up.
Yeah.
And
And
then I
oftentimes,
recognized, like, I'm a pleaser. Like, why?
Yeah.
From my mother.
And then
So-
your needs never get met when you're in that state. And it builds, for lack of a better word, a form of resentment at times because your needs are never met and you're
And
always
then it builds up,
accommodating
and then you
other
get,
people, right?
hard and
Yeah.
you get frustrated.
Yeah.
Like my grandson couldn't hear, couldn't express himself. So I couldn't express myself or say what I want to do. It was always to please the person so they would calm down, neutralize the situation. So I was always neutralizing the situation at 10 years old.
Yeah.
What
Or
were the
8 or
kind of
12.
what were kind of rewards that you started noticing when you just started making these shifts? So usually there's got to be a reward. You got to notice a change, right? Otherwise, we'll drop the idea. So you start reading, you start changing perspective. What were the first things you noticed changing as a result of the change you made?
Well, you change, you become more confident. I think is that what you're asking about?
Well,
Like-
I know that
like
that
you're
would be the
different. You
eventual
just-
outcome. What I'm
you-
saying
you
is
just-
along the way. So here you are, you're thinking this, you read this book, and I know it's hard to recall exactly
Yeah,
that
I'm trying
moment.
to think about it.
Yeah, but think about this, and I'm curious about this, that there's got to be, like the pleasure, you get a reward, you get the upside
Maybe a
of the
taste
move
of
that you
freedom.
made. What was the
Yeah.
first
Like-
recollection you have? I was like, wow, that worked. And I did something different, and I got a different outcome. Or it didn't even have to be the first one, but what are the things you started noticing changing? Because something had to change in
Yeah,
terms
when your
of
perspective
Well, I was
changed.
always
Yeah.
blaming everybody.
Hmm.
It was always your fault.
Mm.
Once I said it was my fault
Hmm.
and I changed, then I
Mm.
seen change.
So like taking
What was the
responsibility for your
change?
part.
What was
So
the
let's
change
say-
that you noticed? That's what I'm wondering.
Well, people were, I guess, different towards you because you were different towards them.
Give me an example.
If I was more friendly towards you, I would
Okay.
get that in return.
Got it.
Simple things.
Right. It's a
But
simple
then-
thing, but it's a big thing.
But then after, smiling became
Mm.
hiding. When
Mm.
you get nervous, you would smile just to cover up rather than saying, hey, this is bothering me.
Mm.
And then that would become my habit.
Mm.
So I didn't
That's
like
why you
that
smile
part.
nowadays.
So,
So when you smile,
a
I
lot.
should know that you're nervous.
So a lot of times
Yeah.
people get nervous, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back then,
absolutely.
Yeah, there's
they call
nervous
me-
laughter. There's nervous.
Some people
yeah.
would call me, Guy Smiley, because I was always smiling.
But you would stick to that plan.
Yeah, and then some teachers would say, "What are you smiling for so much?
Hmm.
What's wrong with you?"
Hmm.
So it's like either way,
You can't win.
What do you?
So-
So what do you do then?
nothing. You
Honestly.
just
You
you
stick
were
to your
quiet,
plan.
and you just
Yeah. Grin and bear
smile
it,
like that.
literally.
And it was hard for that part, but it was always nice. I don't know if the teachers liked you or whatever. We were the immigrants, let's say, back then, and you did well, but without trying. In like geography or something,
Mm.
I was just good at some of those things.
You traveled so much, and you knew where
Mhm.
Germany was. Come
But
on,
geography
and
was just-
Yugoslavia.
I could remember for some reason.
Right.
I had a good memory,
Mm.
and I would remember.
Okay.
And when you did well,
Mm.
but you didn't study, it would get the teacher very upset.
Yeah.
For some reason, I didn't understand why. Just for those reasons, and you're an immigrant, blah blah blah,
Mm.
and they would try to fail you. This is what my mother told me.
Mm.
You're an immigrant, they're trying to fail you.
Mm.
Maybe I couldn't speak English,
Mm.
so for that part, it was more about how I interacted with people. Their response to me was changing.
So you're seeing the change in the feedback that you're getting from the change that you're making.
And you weren't afraid,
Mm. And
or
that
a
leads
little
to
bit
that.
at a time, right? And then one day you just take a chance, see what happens, and you take that chance or whatever it was, and they say, "Wow, it does work." And then you take a more chance and more chance, and as 10
Right.
years, 15, 20 goes by, the chances get bigger, 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 and then you reach a point where, like, why wasn't I thinking of this before? Like, what's the big deal?
Mhm.
That's what I'm wondering.
What's the big deal? But
Right.
it was the fear.
Yeah.
Right.
I think it was the fear.
It's debilitating.
fear, it cripples you.
Yeah.
You know, fear of even just saying hi.
Yeah.
Like you lost that chance
Yeah.
of who knows what kind of person you are, or you know what it could have led to, or anything.
Right.
So you don't take a chance, and then when you don't take a chance, you're jailed. You don't go anywhere.
So what you're speaking of too is like breaking a cycle, right? Because you could have easily perpetuated that negative thought process cycle and brought that into your relationship with your kids too.
Well, yeah, I was on a like down spiral. I was.
Yeah, because that, that's, we're programmed and we don't know always, what our programming from based on our experiences in our home life, if it's good or bad. It is what it is. That's all we know, right? So you've really broken that cycle with that shift starting with your 18
But I did self-medicate.
Okay, so this is part of the journey though,
I mean,
right?
at 8
That's
years
part of
old,
the
I
journey.
started smoking.
Okay.
So, I mean, it did self-medicate. I didn't really drink. Yeah, I guess I drank, but not a lot. It was more about the drugs. And then eventually, just, I don't know, had enough, I guess. Eventually.
Not everybody says that. Not everybody says, "Oh, I had enough." They stay with that
Which is too
Yeah.
much.
cycle.
So
What
I did see a
changed with you?
psychiatrist, right, over about
Sure.
12, 14 years.
Okay.
What he says to me is that you should be under a bridge, like
Mm.
living
Yeah.
there for what you've done.
What you've
So what you've done
experienced.
is amazing.
Yeah.
Here you are.
You know,
Mm.
for that.
Yeah.
It was just, I had friends. You need to leave.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what are you doing around us? You need to, if you want to do business, like what are you doing here with us? Stuff like that. As I was older,
Mm-hmm.
and then as I had a daughter, it was the leverage, and then as I got married later, that was the leverage, and all the support systems on the way. After,
Mm-hmm.
it's just at the beginning, there were lots of times where it wasn't this. It's amazing, and I went back to my perspective of before because of some incident, and I said, "Forget it. This isn't working."
Right.
You go back and do the same habits,
Mm-hmm.
and then it says, "Okay, let's try it again." Then you go back and say, "Okay, let's try it."
Trial
Because you're
and error.
undoing bad habits as you're growing too,
And
and
then
we keep our
eventually-
bad habits and we
What would you
we let them
So
go
there was always that
slowly.
reward,
Yeah.
So,
and that's why you would do the drugs, I guess, to get that reward of I don't have to think about it.
And it's a
The escape.
socially thing too. There's so many currencies attached to it too.
Yeah.
But there's
You don't have to think about it.
yeah.
it was
You
just a
drink, you're on
forget.
drugs, you can be friendly now.
Yeah.
Whatever it
exactly.
was,
Yeah.
you don't have to think about it anymore. You don't
And
think
it,
about
well,
that
it
fear.
numbs you. It numbs
It blocks
you.
the fear.
Yeah.
And you have no fear anymore.
Can I ask you a question? So you do obviously you're making changes, right? We realize that we're making a change, and when we make the change, there's a change in the response and the outcome, and things are moving along. What would you say? But you said yourself there were times you would fall off the wagon.
Lots of
Can we
times,
talk
yeah.
a little bit about that?
Yeah.
Because if things are going so well, why would we do something to fall off the wagon? It doesn't happen by accident. So if you think about it, can you go back to, and I've done this so many times too, I'm wondering if we have the same reasons, but if things are going right, how do you fall off the wagon again?
Well,
What
there's
would
always a
cause-
situation.
yeah,
There's always a roadblock.
right?
So back then, I would let that situation, a roadblock, control me
Mm-hmm.
rather than me just working my way around it.
Give me an example.
Someone doesn't say hi, like from the basic thing.
Right.
Okay, this doesn't work. They're rude. It's got nothing
But
to do.
you
Maybe
know
they
that-
had a
That's your
hard
mom
day.
talking. That's your mom
That's
talking.
right.
But you know
in
it
your head.
works. But you know it does work.
but
That's
at
why I
that
don't
moment,
accept
you've
it
had
that
a-
easily. Like
It's
You've
so
had-
hardwired into him. That's his
You're the
default.
elephant with the string.
Yeah.
hmm.
You
Yeah.
pull. Okay, forget it. Hey, I can do this. You pull, forget it.
Yeah.
Because it gets, you pull a little bit more, it doesn't work yet. And then one day you pull that string just that little more and it breaks out. I said, wow, this was amazing. But it was so hard to go that extra because you always go back to loosening up the way you were before. So you loosen up.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like you go,
Sure.
pull. I'm tired. This is a lot of work. Forget.
Yeah.
I just want to relax.
Right.
Let's go back to the way it was because it was relaxing. I don't have to think about things.
Yeah.
It is. It
And
is.
that's- and
It
that's
is
the
not easy,
thing,
like
right?
mentally, right? To
Yeah.
stick with that.
So you're
plan.
drained all the time. You're
Yeah.
draining.
That's
You're
it.
thinking, oh, this is too
You're
much.
just tired.
I'm
Yeah.
tired. I just
Okay.
want to like.
And that's
Stare
the
at the
thing. When
walls,
we're
wanna stare at the
exhausted,
grass.
we go back to the things that are familiar to us because there's comfort in familiarity.
Okay.
Even if that familiarity is highly dysfunctional, like going back drinking or using drugs or
Okay.
whatever
Because the
our
reward
crutch
is
is.
familiar. The reward,
The
right?
reward is
It's
comforting and familiar. So even though we know it's maladaptive in the long term and to our own detriment, you and that
Smells, I
word,
love that word.
him and that word,
Maladaptive word.
but it serves its purpose. But
It's
it's
hard.
it's
just
just
like with
breaking
anything.
another cycle.
You want to be an
Yeah,
athlete, it's hard.
yeah.
You got to put in the effort. And then you get, no, I can't do it. Yeah, you just got to keep going. And you go back to, but it's hard. So this is a mental
It's in her head. It's
hard
not
thing
like,
is,
oh, I got to work on my
And then
glutes
there's
or something.
commercials and people around you saying, you can't do this. You weren't born into money. You didn't go to university, stuff like that. You got to step on people, like all these small sayings.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then they ruin you. And then you start saying, wait a minute here, why am I saying these sayings? I have to say other sayings. As you get older, you start thinking, I can say this, every day's a good day, whatever. And you start saying those things. But you're brought up with saying,
Your beautiful tattoos,
Yeah.
compassion and forgiveness.
but you're brought
right?
up saying, the wealthy were born that way.
Yeah.
They have an education. They've been taught, blah,
Mm.
blah, blah.
You're an immigrant. Like
You're an immigrant.
Yeah.
Where are you going? Who are you? You know what I mean? What do you think you are reading that book? Yeah, I've been told, what are you reading that for? What do you think you're like smart or something? I'm like, well,
Right.
what do you mean?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
just a book. Like, why can't I read?
Right.
So you're brought up thinking
This is the box I'm
money
in.
doesn't grow on trees. That
Yeah.
you have to steal. You have to steal. You have to take away.
What is that, like that crab mentality you hear? Like, when there's a crab trying to pull themselves out, the rest of the crabs,
Pull them down.
pull them back down. And there's this ostracizing that goes on. I know exactly what you mean. And, but when it's happening right live, that's not what clicks in our mind, that this is what's going on. So we do get pulled back in. And then we're like, hold on a second.
But that maybe that
This,
you get
I'm
that
back to
comfort
where I
feeling.
started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't see it as pulling back in. We see it as
Familiar.
it's comfortable now.
Right. And
But
also,
to get out of your comfort zone, you got to turn on the air conditioning or the heat or something, and then it gets too hot, it gets too successful, or something happens, and my wife would say, I mean, you deserve it. And I would think, but it's going too good. I'm not comfortable.
fear of success.
And you have
is
to
that
go
what they call
back
it?
to your comfort level, which was whatever it was for you at that time. So you do things to sabotage, I guess, yourself, and you say things maybe, and as to get back to that 6-year-old and 8-year-old to feel, comfort and
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
That's what I find is
yeah.
interesting, is that like while we break the cycle, the breaking of the cycle is not one move.
No.
It's like you got to break
It's a
and then you fall
spiral.
back, then you got to break
Yeah.
again, then you got to break again, and you got
Yeah.
to break again,
And
and
then
then
it
one
gets a little
fine
bigger,
day,
little
Yeah.
bigger.
And it
It
gets
becomes-
deeper and more meaningful as you go through
When I
it.
tell, when I have a talk with my psychiatrist, say, oh, this was the straw that broke my back. He says, well, it
Mhm.
wasn't that. It was what were the other things
Right,
that built up to that?
right.
Mhm.
And it wasn't. And I thought about it. Well, it wasn't that. It was all the other stuff that built. But now it's
Because a lot of
that
people,
one
when
little
we
thing.
get to those points, we don't have that psychiatrist to tell us this, right?
Mhm.
We're not in that
But some
therapy
people
session
don't think
at that moment.
they need to go.
This is it. This is the other
Mhm.
thing.
You know what I mean? Why would I go? I can
I
handle it.
know,
So
I
what got
know.
you to think that it's okay to go?
Family.
Because back then it wasn't the same as how we see therapy
No.
today.
I
There's
mean, it was a
lot
big
of
secret.
taboo back then, and
It was a big secret, right?
but you knew, right? So how are you okay with
Well, I
it?
wasn't afraid. I didn't want to go either, but it
Okay.
was, I just had to go. It was going to have meltdowns and just wasn't working out. I was getting depressed.
Right.
Stuff.
Well, when did you start saying, "Hey, I gotta go," or "I'll go this time"? What got you to think that? I think
Well,
that's
family.
important. Really? Okay. So you had some influence there.
Yeah, my wife was having a major operation.
Okay.
I didn't think she was going to make it. My mother was saying I was abusing my daughter, and I was in a custody battle. She was on the mother's side, saying I was brainwashing. It
Not
was
nice.
really
Yeah.
bad.
Sure.
And the police would say, well, why wouldn't I believe your mother for?
Right.
Right.
My wife used to, well, she still does the deaf and hard of hearing, the teacher, and she would do sign language. And my mother would say, that's a cult.
Hmm.
Those are cult signs.
Okay.
So she would tell the police,
The language, yeah.
these guys are in a cult. They do all these signs, and they have kids, blah, blah, blah. So they come to our house, all those little things.
Right.
I was going to have a meltdown. So
Yeah.
all that. So how hard it was then, that's how good it is.
Yeah.
now.
Oh, I like.
But at that
I like how
moment,
you kind
it was
say
bad.
that.
Well,
it was-
separation and
it was-
divorce.
I mean,
or
they're coming in
custody,
your
that's
house,
that's a
but your
pressure
mother's on their
cooker.
side,
Yeah.
because you broke away, let's say,
Yeah.
and you're in a cult. Like, why wouldn't they believe them? Until they came to the house and said, like,
And saw
Like,
your perspective.
what is she talking about?
Yeah.
Like, there's no cult signs. Like, what's going on here? And then she did it again, and then eventually they would say, well, if you do it again, we have to charge her
Mm.
because this is investigated. Da, da, da.
So it's all of that leads to the opportunity of going to a therapist.
Yeah, that part.
If I were just to keep it simple, I'd be like,
Yeah.
all that
That
happens
pushed me over the
leads
edge.
you, but
Yeah,
it
that
takes you
part.
to that point, which gets you so much further.
And
You
that
don't
was,
like we don't see it as that necessarily, like, oh,
Yeah.
thank you for that, but
Mhm.
but it was a good thing.
Yeah. So what opened up? You said something opened up after you went through that experience. What opened up?
What do you
for
mean?
You said, just going back a few minutes ago, you were saying that experience going through the separation and divorce, and that was kind of something that
We got
changed.
leverage.
You
what
use
do
it
you
as
mean?
leverage.
You say you call it leverage. What do you
Yeah.
mean by that?
I got leverage from my daughter because now I didn't have to worry about what anybody said. I just had to make sure she was safe.
Okay.
Okay.
So that was
Yeah.
leverage.
Yeah.
And then I
to do
quit
well
everything.
by her.
Yeah, I didn't have to care what anybody thought.
Yep.
That was my leverage.
Okay.
And then I quit all the drugs, like all that stuff, because that was my leverage. I could do it now without having to explain in detail. I don't want to drink anymore or smoke anymore, whatever it was. I just had to say, I can't do it in front of me. It was an easier way
Yeah.
to get out of that.
Ah,
That was my
okay.
leverage, right?
I
Yeah.
got it now.
It was easier instead of
Then saying
explain.
I don't want to do it,
Yeah,
and then
so,
yeah,
it was leverage, right?
yeah.
Was it because you didn't want to do it, or was it because of your daughter?
Yeah, it was both.
Both.
yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
It was
But
all
it's
right,
socially
right?
So she
acceptable
wasn't-
to say I don't want to do it because of my daughter.
Yeah,
They'll
so the
like people
guys
accept that
would,
more,
They
right?
wouldn't swear in front of her.
Yeah.
If I didn't want to smoke, yeah, don't worry about it. It's okay. I got my daughter with me, and I'd carry her around in the carrier.
Mm-hmm.
And this was in my 30s.
Mm.
So as I was growing, I would leave and come back, leave and come back, leave and come back, leave and come back, and then one day it was over. I just left. But at that moment, it was in my early 30s when I broke the string
Mhm.
or the chain. My mother. Which
That
was,
seems to be the thing
you're
in the
30
30s. Your 30s
and you're
are
living
so
at,
pivotal.
you moved back home because it was comfortable, but you didn't like it, but it was comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So even if it was painful, it was still comfortable.
Mm.
It was what you
Familiar.
knew.
Yeah.
It's that syndrome, right? You want to get away, but when you're away, it's not comfortable. So you go
Wait,
back.
so when you say you would go back, you went back home. What do you mean
I
to?
went back and live with my mother again.
Got it.
It's like
Okay.
move out and go back.
Right.
Oh, it's not working or it's not comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, it was like you're addicted to that feeling of, I don't know, you're depressed, but you don't want to be depressed, but you become depressed because you're so used to it.
Mm-hmm.
That feeling of what's happening, it's all bad. So you always go to that because it's familiar,
Mm-hmm.
the comfort zone.
Yeah.
And the comfort zone, you have to break out of that comfort. And that's what's the hard part is.
Yeah. Because sometimes the things that are comforting are actually toxic for us.
So your friends and stuff, but you're comfortable.
Yeah.
You don't want to go somewhere else and do something new because now it's new. You have to learn it. May not work. It gets complicated. This is comfortable.
Mm.
I'm just going to relax.
Mm.
And then later on in life, you complain, why am I always relaxing? So you move.
Mm.
And you say, well, it's uncomfortable. And you go back. And then one day you have some extra leverage. And you say, forget it. This isn't working out. And you just, when you get that feeling of, I got to go back, so well, I'm going to push another day.
Mm-hmm.
And then another day, another day, another day. And then you forget about it.
So it wasn't anymore that you were only just focusing on yourself. You were also now focusing on
You had some leverage.
somebody
Yeah.
else.
And
You
then
call it
some
leverage. I
leverage.
love that.
It was
Okay,
leverage.
That's interesting.
Was leverage. So you need leverage for anything.
What if you don't have leverage? How do you?
No,
How
but
would
you
you go
find
find
leverage.
Okay, so how do you
Yeah.
find leverage? Like,
So, I found leverage in, like I said, she smelled like smoke. And I was like, wait a minute here. She's a child. Like, what? She didn't smell like smoke. So that was my leverage. And every day, I just quit right there. I don't know, 25 years, let's say. And I just quit. And that was my leverage. I would always think of her when I want to smoke.
Mm-hmm.
Like what it has to do with her.
So something that
Da, da, da.
motivates you.
That was a
If you
motivation.
don't have it within
Leverage.
yourself.
So I had to get it from the outside. And then eventually I motivated myself.
Yeah.
Eventually as time went on.
But you
get
didn't have
more.
it. I've experienced that too. I think we spoke about this, is that when I had to take action on something, I had more love and vigor and just, a dedication to do well by my son, much more than I did
Yeah,
myself.
So the leverage.
It's 100%.
But when you're a kid, the
But
leverage
yeah.
might be somebody's famous, then
Yeah.
they became famous or they started a business from nothing. You say, wow, that's
Yeah.
my leverage. Anybody could do it.
Anyone could do it.
That's
yeah.
right. That's your leverage. So that's why I go back to
Find something.
anybody
that-
could
Go
do
find
it.
leverage,
The
guys.
idea
Yeah.
was, anybody could
Got
do
it.
it.
If you don't have it in you, find it.
Find it.
Find
Find
some
leverage.
Some kind of leverage.
Yeah.
Any kind of leverage. And the
and there's
fear.
always leverage out there.
So leverage could be the opportunity.
Mhm.
You
Right.
just didn't see that opportunity. Maybe you just didn't see the leverage that was right there. And, I would always blame everybody else.
My dad always used to say, "Seek and you shall find."
Yeah.
He would be
Yeah.
referring to a parking spot. Whenever we'd be
It's
looking for
very
a parking spot
appropriate.
in a really busy place, he'd be like, "Seek and you shall
Yeah.
find." Like,
Yeah.
still sticks in my head.
It's a real
We were
thing,
talking about
yeah.
parking spots, but it's
It's
true
for
for
everything.
Yeah.
But if you're not looking,
eventually you'd find the parking spot, right?
Yeah.
And then he'd be like, "Seek, seek, and you shall find." I'm
Mhm.
like,
but if you're
"Dad,
not
it's a
looking,
parking
how are you going to
spot."
find it?
You miss it. Yeah,
You're
you
not
But
miss
you
looking.
gotta seek it, right?
You don't know you've fallen until you hit the ground,
Yeah.
Yeah.
or you don't know you're sleeping until you wake up.
Mm.
That's like, you don't know. Then once you find out and say, wow, I've been sleeping all this time.
Mhm.
And then you get upset with yourself, and that's the leverage. We got to make sure, to move forward.
Did you ever do this when you would call it fall off the bandwagon or fall off the wagon? Did you ever look back at a past version of yourself and say, look at that person had it all together, and here I am again? Did you ever do that?
I don't know if I had it all together. It was up and down constantly.
But you'd look back. Did you ever look back and go, how do I get there again?
No, because I never want to go back there.
Well, I'm talking about like when you were making progress and then you would say you'd fall off, right? So
Okay.
now when you fall off, do you ever look at the person that was doing well before and going, how do I get back to that?
No, because I
Okay.
wanted to get more than that.
Sure.
Mm.
But I never went back to that. I always was like, how am I going to get to there, but not like that?
Right. Ah, okay.
Right.
How do I get there,
To
but
that,
not like that?
that point,
All right.
but not like that. Be able to,
so
instead
that I
of
don't
go
fall
here,
off
yeah,
again.
and you fall off again. So what happened? I got to get to that, but not fall off again. So I don't want to be like that.
Yeah.
I
So
want
what
to
do I
be
do
a little bit
differently?
more,
Yeah.
something, what am I doing?
What's great is that you're using your own self as your reference now as you start moving along. And that's what I keep hearing. It's
Mhm.
really you're using yourself as the reference. You're not really looking anywhere else.
So I eventually learned that I'm my competition.
Right.
Yeah.
That's my point.
Me.
That's it.
Yeah.
So there's growth and all that kind of great
Right.
stuff. But I'm always competing, let's say, with myself.
I call it iterations so that I don't feel like because sometimes it's like, when we try to go back or better, sometimes we do get better in some ways, but in other ways we're not. That other version was still better in some other ways. So I can still learn from that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then there's just iterations. And this iteration's stronger on this, but maybe weaker on this. And then the third iteration is stronger on both. Like,
Mhm.
you know
But
what
there's
I mean?
lots of times where you're like, what for?
Mm.
Why don't I just relax? Watch the grass grow. Like, why am I always thinking about
Mm.
moving forward and more and more and more and more and more? Like, well, what for?
So after your daughter gets you past this point, you start feeling like you're hitting your
Yeah, and then you have
stride.
family. You get married,
Mm-hmm.
and then my wife was a big supporter. You have to have some support,
Yeah, definitely.
like a support, and then the psychiatrist.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't really have a lot of friends. Let's say it was more after because I never had a family,
Mm-hmm.
so I always wanted.
You talked about staying in touch with a group of friends still today.
Yeah. Like let's say
But
there's
they
a
weren't
birthday or
necessarily
something.
doing all the things that you were
No.
doing, and you.
No, we still
But
go
you
to the
still stay
birthday parties
together,
every
yeah.
once in a while. It's just because we don't have the same lifestyle or the
Mhm.
same idea or whatever it is. Doesn't mean we can't hang out.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I learned.
You come from the same
over time.
background,
So as
too.
soon as we meet, 5 years, 3 years later, we just
Yeah.
continue on just like
Yeah.
it was back then.
Right.
We just continue on. It wasn't nothing, no animosity or anything like where were you and all that
Yeah.
stuff. No,
Right.
we just continue
Good to
on.
see
There's
you.
no,
Yeah.
who are you seeing? Like who are you hanging out with? It was just hey, and we just continue on, and it was like nothing ever happened.
Yeah.
Well, what
It's
happened?
true
the most,
friendship, though,
well,
right?
the most
Yeah.
important part was that you were there for each other, even
At that time, right?
even though whatever else was going on in the other activity. The more important part was that you were each other's
Yeah, we were
support.
there. We were family, I
Your
guess,
family.
right?
Yeah, your chosen family.
And that's
Yeah.
the most valuable part of that.
And
Those
that was the hard
relationships.
part is so you had to leave your mother's family to break up, then you had to
Mm.
leave your friend's family,
Mhm.
and then to move on.
Now you got your family.
Then you got your family. But the thing was, when I was younger, some of the friends would say, "What are you doing hanging out here, drinking and smoking every day? Like you keep talking about business and all this stuff. You can't do that here with us. You got to leave. If you want to be that, you got to go and hang out and talk to people that are in business. You're not going to learn business here.
Mhm.
Mm.
right? Like,
And
how am I
that's
going
what
to learn
moved you
business?
into the
That's
next.
actually really positive. It's
know,
so
That's
like,
great.
even
So
though
that
it's
was-
kind of like a form of rejection, for lack of a better word, but it's a
Well-
positive push to say,
Well, you're not going to learn
walk the walk.
about business
yeah.
sitting in the laundry room,
Yeah.
smoking weed and drinking every
Yeah.
night.
No.
Like, you could
Some call it
have-
calling you out or calling you up, whatever
Yeah,
way you want to
whichever way
call
you
it,
wanna
right?
look
and
at
you have
it.
great ideas, but
So
you're
go
not doing
execute
anything.
them. Yeah.
So it's more about putting your ideas into action and
So they
learning
were
about
listening to what you were saying.
You know,
Figure
they
that.
were, yeah.
Yeah.
So did
They
you
heard
put any of your business ideas into action?
Yeah, that's where I'm at now.
And so I know-
Okay.
Well, I had
So
lots
tell-
of different
well,
businesses.
Yeah, tell us
Yeah.
about that.
I had lots of different businesses to start, and it wouldn't work, and to start, and wouldn't work, and start, and wouldn't work, and start, and wouldn't work. It's just that I kept going back to dogs.
All your
Mm.
businesses were dog related?
No, I had
or-
a media business. I used to do websites,
Mm.
and then I had a selling business. We would sell just anything we
Mhm,
could,
mhm.
stuff like that, right? And we just keep trying to think of something.
but it wasn't
Yeah.
passionate for you.
It was so simple, but it wasn't at that moment. What do I want to, like, dogs? What do you mean?
When you say it wouldn't work in the
It
business
just went
side,
hard, and you said, this isn't working. Let's try a different business.
mm,
So I would stop and try a different business.
what was the hard part?
To stop and try something new again.
I mean, in the business, like when it would get hard. What do you mean?
It
Hard.
wasn't progressing fast enough. It
Okay.
wasn't
Like recognizing it wasn't where you
Yeah, it's
wanted
like
it to be.
let's this, or maybe I don't want to do this anymore. It's not there, or I've learned what I needed to learn.
Mm.
Let's go and
And
try
do
something
something
else.
different.
But I think I also see that it wasn't something that you were passionate about.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
just
That's what a lot of it comes
You
up.
gotta
as
start with
at-
your
at-
passion.
At that moment when it gets hard, it's always that gets us through or gets us to start focusing back on that. Like, why am I doing this? What am I really,
it wasn't.
do I enjoy this?
This wasn't. Yeah,
Right.
It was good. I'm burning out on it. It just isn't
Mm.
working out.
Because it wasn't, yeah.
It was work then. It became work.
It became work, right?
yeah.
It wasn't like, oh yeah, let's.
But
do
you
the next
picked up
stuff.
things at every one of those junctures, like you take with you till
Actually
today,
learn.
right?
And then when I started this business, that was one of the hardest.
I don't know what your
things.
business is.
What
now.
is
What's
this
your
business? Yeah.
So we
tell
work
us
with
about
dogs.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
I train dogs, and we have a facility. We have daycare for dogs. We used to have boarding. Just with the COVID, we went from 11 employees to 2.
Oh,
Mhm.
wow.
So there's no boarding.
Yeah, that's hard.
We're only open 8 to 5. But we did move to Yonge Street,
Mhm.
Yonge and Lawrence, which is
There you
That's
are on
prime
Yonge
real
again.
estate.
amazing.
Yeah.
Back to
Amazing.
Yonge.
Well, I'm just saying.
So
like, you
walking
said it
up and
yourself.
down
Once
there,
you're
years
walking
ago.
Yeah,
your
St.
set-
Clair's not far
and
from
now
There's
this
there.
is
never-
never.
I would
Look at
never
how you
have
come
thought
back.
that I would be right there.
What's that book, The Alchemist? Is that
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
similar
actually.
sort of story? You
I
come
have that
back-
actually on my nightstand
Yeah,
to read
My
right
first
now.
a good
read
book.
that I remember that it was
It's a
worth
good
it
one,
to me.
yeah.
But
good
you come
book.
back to where you start, and it was always right there.
Yeah.
But like you're now in a different iteration of yourself.
It was just one of the hardest things to do was to have your own idea
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
and for people to support you. So you have to have the family, friends, let's say, or some other support like a psychiatrist
Mm-hmm.
to help you. Everybody will support you in a little bit differently. They would help you. You can do it,
Mm-hmm.
or don't worry about it. Versus having the fear and worry. You're always worried. So let's say I'm driving and someone cuts me off. I'm mad, but I don't know what day they've had.
Right.
Maybe they're
They didn't know they cut
maybe
you
they
off,
were going
maybe.
to the hospital.
Yeah.
for
You
their
do that in
child.
the middle of the rage?
No, I don't do that anymore.
Okay, you don't do that.
Don't rage
Because when
anymore.
we're raging,
Yeah.
like, it's like that. There's
So now
no
I don't
thought
do
like
that because I'm thinking after,
Mm,
well, what if they had to get an emergency?
mm,
Like, why am I blaming them?
right.
Just take my time.
Yeah.
Mm,
So I would always be, I would always snap,
mm,
quick.
right.
So I wasn't at peace and all that kind of stuff. I just was always blaming other people.
So you realize it's not because the person cutting you off,
Yeah.
it's because of something else that I got to work
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, what,
I'm
what was-
heightened right now.
Yeah, like why am I at this stage
Yeah.
that,
Right.
and you come in front, like, well, like what's the big deal?
Yeah. It's like the
Well,
straw that breaks the camel's
Yeah,
back.
so it was so
It's like-
personal. You
Right.
cut me off.
Right.
yeah.
So like, what's the big deal?
Right.
Why is that so hard? It's got to be some other things that are going on.
yeah.
It's not your fault. So one of the hardest things was to always say it's always my fault.
Do you still go walking on Yonge Street?
Well,
Mhm.
I take the
He's
dogs
right
out for
there.
a walk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not like
And when
before.
you're walking, do you ever see kids walking around and going, looking at a kid or looking at somebody going, because there are, do you ever see that around you? Like you're like, okay, I
That was
remember
me.
that person. That reminds me of me.
Yeah,
Or do you
sometimes
ever
I don't want
wonder?
to remember it.
Yeah.
Mm,
Like a lot of stuff, I don't remember. like a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that there
Sure.
was
Yeah.
good days, but a lot of bad days.
Well, that's what you
Mhm.
say. When you forgive, you also like completely
So
let
I
it go
forget
too,
a
right?
lot
Yeah,
of
Just
you
stuff.
do
forget it.
forget it.
I
Forget
mean, I
about
don't talk about.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've ever talked about some of the stuff I've
Mhm.
talked about. Not even to anybody, really.
Right.
Mhm.
I don't really talk about it. I don't feel a need. So it just brings back stuff I don't remember, and then I remember. Maybe like my mother told me, "This isn't your father. Do you want to know him?" And I would say, "No, not really. Like, what's the point now?
Mm.
Why? I don't want to know him."
Did he make any initiative or to stay in contact with you?
No, he was in
Well,
like
he's
Europe. He's
yeah.
Yeah, he was just
we're
gone. Yeah, it was
running
a
all over the
business
place.
deal. Yeah.
Who was he? I don't know. All I know is obviously he was a musician or something. I was like, oh, okay. Why are you telling me now? Like all this was like a big lie,
Yeah,
and now you
it
want to
connects
fix
to
it
your
with
self-identity
telling me
too,
who.
right?
Like, I forget it.
Yeah.
And she would have, like every 3 or 4 years, do you want to know what he's doing? No, not really. Like, what's it going to make a difference with us now?
Mm-hmm.
So now can I ask you something? Because I've wanted to ask you this, and a lot of times with parents and children, this happens. Like I hear it a lot. I've even had the same thoughts myself. Okay, like
Okay.
yeah, and you're saying things, and I'm like, wow, this is hitting the same note over and over again with me. And I wonder because you talk about changing perspective. So now I'm asking like this iteration of you with your mom, because I've heard you make reference to it repeatedly. Like, how would you change your perspective on your mom then? Because if that's maybe all it takes.
My perspective of her now,
Like, yeah, like how do you
I mean,
spin this differently with your mom? Because
that's the way she
frankly,
is.
when you would go back, she would still be there for you. She brought you to this point.
Yeah.
She made this arrangement with this other stranger for you, maybe. Yes,
So-
she was controlling. Maybe she just loved you and wanted to protect you. Like
So I
I'm
just-
thinking about all these things.
So I
how
just
does your
didn't like the
perspective
way.
change?
I just didn't like what she did.
Right.
Not
Sure.
the person she was. But
Right.
then I
Mhm.
would think about, well, the war,
Right.
whatever. And then as I
Right.
grew,
Right.
I didn't take it personally anymore.
You
But that took so
understood,
many
yeah.
years of trying to understand
Yeah.
that this was her lifestyle.
Right.
And in her mind, she
Right.
was doing the best she could.
Right.
But in my mind, it was the worst thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
100%.
So I had to break that
Right.
Yeah.
cycle if possible. And it wasn't the greatest thing. I mean, she didn't make it. She got COVID
Right.
at the beginning and she didn't make it, right?
Oh,
She was in a
that's-
long-term care facility. But even to that day, she was still there's no
Protective?
budging. No, there
Yeah,
was no.
protective.
It was still
Just
up
fear,
here.
eh?
Mhm.
You know, what are you doing? I mean, I had a business, and she didn't even know. She didn't care.
Mm-hmm.
I'd show her the building. You know, all I wanted her to say was, "And this is amazing."
Yeah, good for
Yeah.
you.
And
I'm
she never
proud
said
of you.
that ever. And I would say, I mean, you didn't even say I was a good dad.
Right.
And her response was, well, I didn't say you were a bad one.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what? What do you mean? So all those things goes back to, you just wanted, I guess, her to say, wow.
Right.
But
Yeah.
she never said wow.
Yeah.
Like for anything.
She probably didn't know how.
Unless
Yeah.
it was geared towards us being together.
Mm.
So she never really said, look at this place. Or, I'd give her like, in the early years, like a calendar. You'd have a calendar, your business,
Mhm.
just,
Yeah.
and she would we wouldn't even hang it up.
Mm.
I'm like, why wouldn't you do that?
Right.
Why wouldn't you just say at least, you did good. I don't
Good
know,
job,
something,
kiddo.
anything,
Yeah.
I don't know,
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
It was never that. So maybe that was, she gave me the leverage.
It comes back to
the,
that.
ne-
Yeah.
the negative leverage, I guess,
Mm.
For that stuff. But you never got that because
Yeah.
you were always neutralizing her situation. So you would please, so she wouldn't get upset.
And there's a sadness to that she lived her whole life
It was bad.
without
She
having,
could have traveled. She could have
yeah,
all kinds of
without
stuff.
breaking that cycle for herself.
She was always in a negative, upset mood all the time.
You refer to
Constantly.
Tony Robbins, right? And one of my favorite lines, I think, that is attributed to him is change expectation to appreciation,
Yeah.
and the world changes in an instant. All right?
So
So we have these expectations of our parents to say this to us. And then when they don't, it's like like everyone else can say it, but if they don't,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right, then it's like
Well, they're your parents.
that's the
Yeah, your voice-
expectation
their
part.
voice is
But because it's a parent, yeah, it's my right to expect that from my parent, right? And then when that doesn't happen,
Mm.
right?
And then when you're growing up, because I'm an only child, you're
Mm.
expected to fix things.
Yeah,
You're 10 or 12.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how to fix this. Or I
right,
just want to go and hang out with my friends.
right.
Well, why don't you fix this? You need to do that. You need to do stuff around the house, like you're the man of the house,
Mhm.
Right.
which was hard again. So he couldn't really hang out with your friends, but you didn't want to stay home and fix things.
And
So
what
you were
did you
kinda
learn
stuck
from
in the
that
middle.
experience, right? You could probably say, I learned something from that.
Mhm.
What did I learn from that?
How to fix things and
Mhm.
whatever else. Like, it wasn't fun, but that's what you got out of it.
And it was very demanding.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it was a lot
Probably
of
makes you really
guilt.
conscientious too,
There
to
was a
be
lot of
like
guilt.
looking for things.
There was a lot of guilt.
Mm.
You didn't do this for me. Why can't you do this? It was a guilt, constant, and that was a controlling thing. She controlled through guilt. That's why I try not to put guilt on my kids.
Yes.
Mhm.
I try
Right.
to
That's the
explain,
lesson,
no
right?
guilt. I don't want
Right.
to give you a guilt trip. You know, I don't want to do that. It's just that sometimes my wife might say, "You're starting to sound like your mother." I'm like,
Isn't that
Oh.
ironical?
I go,
Isn't that
'Cause
ironical?
I'm starting to go to
In that
give it a guilt
pathway,
trip or something.
yeah.
So, whoa, wait a minute. So you're
Mm.
always,
Reeling it in.
you're always correcting yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, for some reason, you always go back to the simplest way.
Mm.
Well,
is
because it's
that
where
way.
we're programmed, right? So, like in the first 5 years of
Mm.
our lives, our brain is hardwired for life for that. So, what it happens to us in those 5 years are so fundamental to who we are the rest of our journey. So, it's the rest of our journey is oftentimes when we have such negative experiences hardwiring us. The rest of our journey is often undoing that.
But we don't
right?
realize you
But we
have
don't
to work
realize
for
it.
things.
Yeah.
It doesn't just come to you. You have to work for it. So what you
Yeah.
said earlier was you work, and then you find that opportunity.
Yeah.
Or the leverage because you've worked, whatever. Work.
Yeah.
With marriage, friends, anything, you have to work at it. Even just being in shape or basketball, whatever it is, you have to work at it.
Mm.
You're not just born with that talent.
Yeah.
You have to work at it.
I love that. I love that. And we work on it, but I also think that it's there inside of us. We got to work on it to
Mhm.
develop it, but it's there inside of us.
Yeah, there's always something you say, you know what? Eventually, this is what I need to do. You always have
Mhm.
this feeling that says,
right?
So,
I got to do this. This is what I'm going to do.
So, like hearing your story now, because I didn't know you before we came into the room. Really, we just had a brief conversation, and you mentioned something about dogs when we were sitting down prior to coming in here, and it was about how when you're training them, you don't reward them with like food or treats, but it's any kind of reward is affection and love and or compassion, depending what the moment is with the dog. And I just see that connection to with like that's also another shift from how you were raised to what
yeah.
you're doing in your profession
So
because
for me,
you've learned that.
the hunger shouldn't be a motivator.
Yeah.
Mm.
So as you grew up in poverty, let's say hunger shouldn't be a motivator.
Yeah.
But when you want to teach a dog something, a lot of people will use hunger as a motivator. For me, is like, you can't do that.
That's a
That's
basic.
abusive
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
But a lot of great things are done with treats or food rewards. So I don't knock them.
Yeah.
It's just that for me, I can't do that. I want to give them affection, and there's a different relationship between us. I want to gain their trust, which is the reward.
Yeah.
Is a social reward.
Yeah.
It's the food reward. So there's always
But
a
it's also
reward
the relationship, right?
the relationship building
That's so important.
between you and the dog,
Yeah.
or the cat or whatever it is. But dogs work great for me.
Yeah.
So when I go and I teach people, they'll always say, well, "Why don't you use treats?" I just don't, because I want to do the
And guess what? You always have affection with you.
yeah, and I can't carry food everywhere
Yeah.
I go and all that stuff.
That's
There's no way.
great.
It's not practical.
Yeah.
And it's harder, just that a lot of people want the quick way, which is I bribe you.
Yeah.
But that
Or
for
steal
me-
it.
And then it reinforces the relationship.
I'm just
more
saying,
too,
I
right?
can't help but see
Yeah.
like how all
Yeah.
of these things from your
Yeah.
past, you keep using them as leverage
Yeah.
to do what you're doing today, and how it all comes back. And then, so the last word is when, you said earlier as well that you wouldn't change a thing about all of it.
Now,
Seriously? So no, but true,
No, I
right?
wouldn't
So
change.
let's take a look at the present. You wouldn't change one thing at all. I'm about to check you on this, but go
Mm-hmm.
ahead.
Change. Well,
Even that, right? What you just thought you
I
wouldn't
can't
change.
say
Right.
you wouldn't change, but then I wouldn't have the family I have. I
Yeah.
wouldn't have the kids. I wouldn't have the
There's
stuff.
so many variables.
There's so many
Yeah.
things. Maybe I would have done stuff differently, maybe, but I don't know, maybe not.
Right.
So when I really think about it,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, maybe I would have changed, but nah, not really.
Yeah.
But nothing's 100% because later on today I might think, maybe I would have changed that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like that
Maybe I
butterfly
would've.
effect story. Like you go back and tinker with one little
And
thing,
it's going to ruin everything
and
else.
you don't get
Yeah.
all of this that you have.
We don't know that how the
Right.
thing
So
unfolds.
all of it's
eventually I
connected.
became happy with how my mother treated me or content or, I dealt with it because this is how I am now.
Right.
I
Yeah.
wouldn't be like
Well, I
this.
think you separated that
It's
her
just-
and you're you, right? And
all the
that,
mistakes, all those
Yeah.
things at the time was brutal.
Sure.
yeah.
That's amazing now.
Isn't it?
Now,
Yeah. Now.
because I can look back
Right.
at, oh yeah.
And see
oh,
what
yeah.
you've learned from that.
So what we learn as time goes on is I shouldn't have to wait 5 years to laugh at what I'm doing now, which is the
Laugh
hard
now.
part.
Right. Back
Because
to
every time I
perspective.
think about it, so I kind of understand dying 1,000 times.
Mm.
If I think about it 1,000 times, every time I think about that bad part, I've died 1,000 times.
Mm.
Maybe that's some of the reasons why I don't go back to the past, because I keep dying 1,000 times. I just want to move forward now.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to go back all the time. I
Mm-hmm.
just want to move forward if possible. That's why I really don't talk about the past.
Well, it's so true,
Mhm.
but you're able to reflect on it and start seeing how it all adds up and takes you to where you are today. Again, it's no, it wasn't done without a lot of hard work on your part to
Oh,
change
it's
that
the hardest thing
perspective.
to do.
It is the
Mhm.
hardest thing to do, but you did it. And I was hoping you could give a message to people who struggle with changing perspective. That's what the biggest thing I get out of today.
It's fear.
Don't live in the fear.
Yeah, don't be afraid
Yeah.
of change. Make change your friend.
Yeah.
Let's say. Don't be afraid of change.
Yeah.
Or don't be afraid of anything within reason.
Yeah.
Just do it.
Yeah. Well, fear,
then
you're
move
not
on,
in
right?
action. Courage, you're in action.
The fear
the
of
thing.
putting yourself
Fear-
out there.
Yeah. Fear keeps you
You know
stagnant.
that saying, dare greatly. Do it.
Yeah.
Put yourself out there. And if it doesn't work, doesn't mean it didn't work forever. It's just that didn't work. Try something else. Try this. Try that. Try this.
Yeah.
Eventually, you might get to that part, but you can't get there. The thing, you have to put your foot forward and go that way if possible. So don't let fear guide you.
Mm-hmm.
Take a chance. Put yourself out there and see what happens.
Yeah. It's very true.
So when I went to Yonge Street,
Mm.
I put these big awnings out. And, it's got the company name and all that stuff. And I was like, somebody would walk by and say, like, what is this? So I was thought, I put myself out there because this is Yonge Street now.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I counted the cars. Well, 58,000 cars a day would pass by
Wow.
the center. We're right on Yonge. There's
Mhm.
people, the sidewalk is right there.
Mhm.
58,000.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
1.6 million a month.
Yeah.
Just cars.
Yeah. Yeah.
Never mind the people in the cars.
Yeah.
Never mind the foot
Yeah.
traffic.
Right.
So when I thought,
That's a lot of advertising.
yeah. So I was like, I'm out there.
You're
The
giving
first-
the landlord the reason to increase the rent.
Oh,
right?
yeah, yeah.
It's
You
already
leave that part out.
It's already.
It's actually not that great,
It's not,
actually.
Let's not
Like,
talk
yeah.
about how great,
It's already
how
done.
great it is right now.
It's already But you put yourself out
I'm never
there.
on Yonge Street.
I'm just making that.
In that neighborhood, there's different expectations. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you put yourself out there the first couple of months. Could I put that up there?
Mm.
And it was, yeah, it's amazing now.
Do
And
it.
then people would say, oh yeah, because they're purple,
Right.
and I wanted them to be able to notice it. So
Mm.
yeah, where the purple awnings are,
Yeah.
and we're right at the corner of Woolbourne and Yonge.
Right.
So we have the side of the building and the front.
That's
So you
amazing.
got a beautiful access.
So
there,
it was,
yeah.
it was
And you continue to stay true to yourself.
possible,
It is possible.
but you don't know, yourself. I guess maybe you evolve. So, you know what I mean? You always grow.
Thank you, man. I
Thank you so
really
much.
appreciate
No problem.
walking us down that path, and I think it's a fantastic
Take a
journey,
chance.
and I've learned so much from it on changing perspective and how we got to take ownership of that.
Mhm.
That's right.
most
of the
Ownership.
time.
It's
And
always
how
our
we're
fault.
also similar in so many ways.
Yeah.
Like we all have similar stories and similar struggles. regardless of where we come from. Like the three of us come from totally different places,
Yeah.
but the
the
pain,
same
pain's
thing.
pain,
It's the
struggle,
same thing.
struggle,
What I've learned
fear's
also
fear.
is, why is my emergency more important than your emergency?
Yeah,
Everybody's got an emergency.
yeah,
So I should look at yours rather than me or my emergency.
yeah,
I've got to get there first.
Or-
How do I know what your emergency is?
yeah. Everything through the lens of compassion, right?
So it's about,
Perspective.
the perspective and about the experience.